I'm Mark Callan, Mr. Saltwater Tank, coming to you on behalf of SaltwaterAquarium.com. This is Mr. Saltwater Tank, RUF, raw, uncut, first impressions, the show where I call it as I see it with products that I haven't used before. Today, we're looking at the Flipper feeding kit. It's actually two different feeding implements in one kit, both of which connect to your Flipper algae scraper. It has a little piece of Velcro on here, and all you gotta do is put the felt side of your Flipper scraper out into the tank and then stick this right on. So there's a feeding tube where you can put frozen food in, and as it melts, it sinks and comes out of the holes of the bottom. And then there's a clip for nori, a simple algae feeder. So first impressions looking at this is the tube is interesting to me because other products like this that I've looked at, some of them have an adjustable ring at the bottom so you can vary how much water is getting into the tube and therefore how much food is coming out. This one has none of that, so we may find that I'm getting a lot of food dumped down in there very quickly, which may or may not be all right. Sometimes these feeding tubes are built as a way to put food in here and let it move out over the course of several hours. I may get too much flow through this one since it doesn't have that adjustable plate. We'll just have to see and put this thing in the tank and give it a whirl. Now the nori clip, that's pretty straightforward. It looks like it's got pretty good bite. I've got some bigger tangs in my tank now, my Dulcimer, my Naso, my black tang, so we'll see if they can rip the food right out of that clip. One thing that I've experienced with bigger toothed fish, harlequin tusk, triggerfish, they're gonna rip the nori right out of that clip. Not everyone has those fish in their tank though, so that may or not apply to you. All right, so let's put these things in my tank. Let's load the tube up with some frozen first and see what kind of results I get out of that in a real world scenario. Here's the feeding tube full of a cube of mysis. In this case, I left too much air in the tube, so the food is getting pressed down on the bottom of the tube. Ideally, the tube would float at the middle or top of the tube, so I let some air out. That released some food, but after 10 minutes, no more food had moved out of the tube. Therefore, I moved the tube down closer to the Red Sea reef wave in hopes of getting higher flow across the bottom of the tube so that more food would get sucked out. That strategy worked, but not as well as I thought. Flipping to the nori clip, it didn't work in my tank due to the large tangs that ripped the clip right off the flipper. And there it goes. Okay, let's try it again, and let's try to press the clip onto the flipper with more force. Yeah, that didn't work either. What's my thought on the Flipper feeding kit now that I've used it? Starting with the nori clip, I really only see that working in applications where you have smaller fish, smaller tangs, smaller angels, fish that aren't gonna rip it right off the flipper like mine did and then leave you with a clip that's underneath your aquascape that now I get to go fishing for. The feeding tube, I like the idea of having a way that you can put food in the tank and slowly release food, but I would only use it in a high flow area. You want that tube right next to a high flow power head to pull that water by the tube to pull the food down to get it down into your tank. Then I want that high flow power head to broadcast that food so we don't have just one fish that's hanging right underneath the tube hogging all the food. Because the idea is that you can put some food in there and feed everything in your tank. Not gonna work if the release is very, very slow. So in my application, the feeding kit is not gonna work for me, but I do see where it can work. So I'm not ruling this thing out completely. I'm just gonna see it being useful in certain applications.